Sometimes the mountains warn us long before we understand why. On a frozen Wyoming morning, a German shepherd suddenly growled toward the ridge, low, sharp, and unmistakably afraid of something hidden beneath the snow. Minutes later, strange tracks appeared where no one should have walked, and a truth far more chilling when the storm began to rise from the mountain. Stay with this story, because once you see what the dog saw, you'll never look at winter the same way again. Subscribe to Dogs of Valor for more powerful stories of courage, instinct, and the animals who refuse to let us face the darkness alone. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe for more. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The winter night lay frozen over the Wyoming mountains, the air sharpened by a biting, 8° wind that carved silence into the land. Inside a small log cabin, half buried beneath drifting snowbanks, lived John Mercer, a 56-year-old former SWAT officer whose life had quieted into a routine as stark and predictable as the northern cold. John was a tall, weathered man with a square jaw partly hidden beneath a short, steel-gray beard that had grown uneven after years of neglect. His hair, dark once, now carried streaks of ash like the mountains outside. His body remained muscular but stiff at the joints, scars of past missions lingering in the way he stretched each morning. His storm-blue eyes often seemed to stare past the world itself, haunted by memories of doors blown open and friends who never made it out. Retirement had not softened him. It simply redirected all the noise of his old life inward. His only companion was Atlas, a 6-year-old German shepherd with thick black and tan fur, a broad chest and focused amber eyes that never missed a movement. Atlas bore a faint scar across his right flank, a mark from the night he saved John during their last mission together, when an armed suspect turned on them in a cramped hallway, and the dog intercepted the bullet meant for John. Since then, their connection had become something more than handler and K9. It was a quiet brotherhood forged through danger, loyalty, and survival. Atlas moved with both grace and readiness, always listening to things John could not hear. Most nights in the cabin were simple. The crackle of the fireplace, the whisper of the wind through the pine trees, Atlas resting near the hearth while John read or tried, often unsuccessfully, to fall asleep without the ghosts of the past demanding attention. Tonight, however, the wind howled with unusual ferocity, swirling snow against the windows like icy fingers scratching for entry. John sat at the edge of his worn leather armchair, rubbing his temples as the storm intensified. His thoughts drifted, as they often did, to the moment he retired, the aftershock of losing his teammate Marcus in a warehouse raid. Marcus had been his partner for 11 years, a man with a dry sense of humor and unwavering discipline. The explosion that claimed him had left a jagged fracture in John's spirit, turning him from a man who charged into chaos to one who flinched at the echo of metal striking concrete. Since then, loneliness and guilt had followed him like shadows. Atlas lifted his head suddenly, ears snapping forward, body stiffening. A low rumble rose from deep in his chest, alert, not aggressive. "What is it, boy?" John asked, though Atlas never reacted without reason. Another gust of wind slammed the cabin, but Atlas ignored it. Instead, he walked to the door, posture tense, tail stiff, pupils narrowing toward the frosted window. There was something outside, something wrong. Atlas whined once, sharp and urgent, then barked with a force that shook the wooden frame. John's pulse jumped. Atlas was not a dog who panicked. He was a dog who warned. Grabbing his coat, John moved toward the door with practiced precision, every SWAT reflex reawakening in his muscles. The storm spilled into the cabin as he pushed the door open, a roaring wall of white that swallowed sound and sight alike. Atlas bolted into the snow, nose lifted, sprinting toward the front yard. "Atlas, stay close!" John shouted, but the wind nearly shredded his voice. The dog veered sharply left, barking in short, clipped bursts, not random panic, but patterned signals. John followed, boots sinking deep into the powder. His breath crystallized in the air as he lowered himself against the storm, eyes scanning the swirling dark. Then he saw it. At the edge of the yard, half collapsed beside a snow-laden pine, was a woman. Her body was curled forward, arms clutching her ribs as if holding herself together. Her clothes were torn and frostbitten, a once thick parka shredded as though she had forced her way through branches or struggled against someone's grip. Beneath the ice crusted on her face, her skin was pale, almost bluish, with scratches streaked across her cheeks. Her lips trembled uncontrollably, and her breathing came in short, frantic bursts. Dark brown hair, tangled with snow, clung to her face and shoulders. She looked to be in her early 40s, tall but painfully thin, like someone who had endured more than physical cold. John knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, wide, hazel, filled with terror, so raw it pierced through the storm itself. She tried to lift her head but collapsed against him. Atlas circled them, growling softly into the darkness beyond the yard, hackles raised. Whatever had driven her here, it wasn't gone. The woman's voice broke out in a cracked whisper, her breath shaking violently. Someone is hunting me. He'll come back. He always comes back." Her pupils dilated as though seeing something behind John, something the storm hid. Her fingers twitched toward the trees before her strength failed entirely. Then, with a small gasp, she went limp, unconscious. John swept her into his arms, shocked at how light she felt. This wasn't a woman who had wandered and gotten lost. This was someone who had been running for her life. "Atlas, inside," John commanded. Atlas didn't obey immediately. He remained at the tree line, body low, nose pointing into the storm as he scanned left and right. His breath came out in hot, rapid bursts, vapor twisting in the wind. For a moment, John wondered if Atlas sensed the presence of another person, hidden somewhere between the black trunks and drifting snow. "Atlas, let's go." The dog finally retreated, though reluctantly, glancing over his shoulder as he followed John back to the cabin. Inside, John laid the woman on the couch near the fireplace. Her soaked clothes clung to her frail frame, revealing deep bruises along her arms, shadows of violence inflicted recently and repeatedly. He carefully checked her pulse. It was weak but present. Her fingers spasmed once, then stilled. Who was she? How had she reached his isolated cabin in a storm no person should have survived? And more terrifying, who was she running from? Atlas sat beside the couch, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Snow melted slowly off his fur, dripping onto the wooden floor. He didn't relax, not even for a second. John stoked the fire higher and wrapped the woman in a thick wool blanket. As he worked, his mind churned, a flood of old instincts rising from years of training. His cabin was deep in the backcountry. People didn't just appear here, not unless fate dragged them miles through the killing cold. And she had said something that chilled John more than the storm outside. He'll come back. Not he's chasing me, not he hurt me, but he always comes back. John sat beside her, studying every bruise, every tear in her clothing, trying to read the silent story of what she'd endured. Her appearance suggested she was once strong, her height, her angular features, the determined curve of her jaw, but weeks of fear had hollowed her. She looked like someone who had been living in fight or flight so long that her body had turned into a whisper of itself. Atlas whined softly, then went to the window and pressed his nose against the frosted glass. Something in his posture unsettled John. The dog wasn't simply alert, he was anticipating. John's heartbeat echoed the storm's rhythm, steady at first, then quickening. The woman shivered, her voice barely an exhale. "Please, don't let him find me." Then she slipped fully into unconsciousness, and John realized, with the cold certainty of a man who had seen too much evil in his life, that the night had delivered him not a victim of the storm, but the beginning of a secret someone was willing to kill to keep buried. Morning rose reluctantly over the Wyoming mountains, a thin, defeated light seeping through the ragged edges of the storm as though even the sun feared what the night had left behind. Snow lay heavy and undisturbed except for the wounded chaos carved into it by desperate feet, tracks that told a story the wind dared not speak. John Mercer stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee warming his scar-stiffened hands, though no human fire could melt the cold tightening in his gut. Atlas moved ahead of him, tail low, muscles coiled, breath blooming into the frozen morning like steam from a restless forge. Nose to the snow, the dog tugged at a faint trail, focused, driven, following it not as a curious creature, but as a seasoned hunter who knew exactly what danger smelled like. The tracks revealed themselves slowly, deep boot prints partially swallowed by fresh drifts, and beside them thin, erratic grooves scarring the white surface, grooves that made John's stomach clench because they whispered of something dragged or someone. He knelt, steam rising with each breath, studying the strange, halting pattern. These weren't the frantic markings of a terrified fugitive. They were deliberate, detours, pauses, angles that suggested someone had stopped, listened, then moved again with the calculation of a predator. Atlas barked once, sharp and cutting, pointing his amber gaze toward the forest where the trees loomed like ancient sentinels guarding a secret. Snow-laden branches arched overhead like frozen ribs. Something had passed through there, recently, silently. Behind him came a trembling voice. "Don't go farther. Please. Don't." John turned. Rachel Ford stood framed in the cabin doorway, wrapped in a wool blanket that looked too heavy for her trembling frame. In the pale morning light, her story lived plainly on her skin, bruises blooming like terrible flowers across her arms, eyes shadowed by days of terror, lips cracked from cold and fear. And beneath all that, etched into the lines of her face, was a resilience that refused to break even as her hands trembled. Her posture, once perhaps confident, now folded inward as though shielding her ribs from memories. John stepped toward her. "You shouldn't be out in the cold yet." "I can't let you walk into those trees," she whispered. Her gaze fell to the tracks. "That was him. I know it." John's brows knit. "Who is he?" Rachel swallowed, breath hitching. "My name is Rachel Ford. I'm a search and rescue specialist. 3 days ago I went missing because I was investigating the old Ridgeway ski lodge, the one that shut down a decade ago. People reported screams, lights. Everyone said it was wind or wildlife." She shook her head. "But it wasn't." Her fingers whitened against the blanket. "Someone lives there, in the tunnels, someone who shouldn't." Atlas growled softly, confirming what John already knew. Whatever stalked her last night had not vanished with the dawn. "What does he want from you?" John asked. "I don't know," she whispered, "but he didn't want me leaving, and when I ran, he followed. Through the storm, through the trees, like he knows the whole forest by heart." Her voice fractured. "He's silent, too silent, and he doesn't stop." John's instincts, long-buried SWAT reflexes, stirred uneasily within him. Atlas paced, claws clicking softly against the porch, every sense alive. Rachel stepped closer, her limp visible now, the pain carefully hidden behind determination. "If you call the sheriff," she said urgently, "he'll disappear. He always disappears, and people die when he's cornered." John exhaled through clenched teeth. Retirement had stripped away the badges and radios, but never the old habits. Atlas barked again, pulling toward the trees. When John hesitated, the dog looked back at him, message clear as a shout. "Come see." John nodded. "Just to the start of the trail." Rachel grabbed his sleeve, strength born of fear. "Don't do what I did. If he sees you with me, he won't stop until one of you is dead." John met her gaze, saw not panic, but the cold logic of a survivor who had outrun death by inches. Slowly, she released him. He and Atlas stepped several yards into the trees. The boot prints deepened, then looped back toward the cabin's blind spots, circling like a wolf testing fences before striking. Atlas lowered his head, growling at a broken branch where scent still clung fresh and sharp. Someone had stood there not long ago, watching, waiting. John scanned the dark seams between the pines. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being observed pressed against his spine like the touch of a cold knife. He retreated. Back at the cabin, Rachel's expression collapsed into dread. "He came here," she whispered. John nodded. "He watched the cabin before you reached it." Rachel's voice trembled. "Then we have to leave, because if he knows where I am," she swallowed. "He won't stop." Atlas paced tight circles, casting wary glances toward both forest and woman, as if trying to herd the truth into the open. Something remained unseen, something worse than tracks in the snow. John looked at Rachel, her bruised skin and haunted eyes, then at the forest where the shadows crouched like waiting beasts. That unspoken truth hung heavy in the icy air. A man was hunting her. But what followed her out of that storm felt older than fear, colder than the mountains, and far more patient. The afternoon sky dimmed into a muted sheet of winter gray as John Mercer tightened the straps of his cold-weather pack. The second storm had not yet arrived, but the air held that heavy, breathless stillness that warned trouble was approaching. Atlas paced near the tree line, leaving sharp paw prints in the snow as he looked repeatedly toward the mountains, with the tense focus of a creature reading danger long before humans sensed it. Behind John, Rachel Ford stood bundled in one of his spare insulated jackets, a dark blue one that swallowed her lean frame. The hood shadowed her bruised cheek and tired hazel eyes, but it couldn't hide the determination slowly returning to her posture, a quiet strength built through years of rescue work, cracked but not broken. Her skin held the pale stiffness of someone who had lost too much heat for too long, and her lips remained chapped, but she insisted she could walk. "We only go as far as Atlas insists," John warned gently. "No deeper. If the next storm hits early, we turn back." Rachel nodded, breath forming thin clouds. "If Atlas is tracking what I think he is, we won't need to go far." John studied her, not just her injuries, but her bearing. Beneath the trauma, Rachel had the instincts of a professional, shoulders straight, attention cutting to every sound, scanning for exits without thinking. She moved stiffly, though, her left leg dragging just enough to reveal swelling beneath the fabric. She wouldn't complain. He already knew that. People in search and rescue never did. They carried everyone else first. Atlas barked sharply, pulling their focus to the narrow path leading toward the ridge. "Let's follow," John murmured. They moved in single file across the snowy terrain, crunching through fresh powder as the wind hissed around the pine branches overhead. The climb steepened near the base of the mountain, where thin sheets of ice clung to rocks like glass beneath pale winter light. Atlas continued ahead with absolute certainty, nose low, paws cutting through drifts. After nearly an hour of climbing, they reached a small clearing where the wind funneled between two ridges, stinging their faces with flecks of broken ice. Something caught John's eye instantly, an area of snow unnaturally smooth, too, even to be natural. Atlas growled, circling. "What is that?" Rachel whispered. John knelt, brushing away layers of snow. Beneath them lay a tangle of pine branches, stones, and packed earth, forming a crude camouflage. Atlas began digging with frantic urgency. Rachel crouched beside John, eyes widening. Someone hid something here. John uncovered the final layer, revealing a rusted metal hatch almost perfectly blended into the terrain. Cold air seeped from its edges, carrying a stale metallic smell. "This hatch hasn't been exposed naturally in years," he muttered. "Someone put everything back carefully." "Why hide it?" Rachel murmured, though dread already filled her voice. John gripped the handle and pulled. The hatch groaned, hinges shrieking against years of ice. A rush of freezing air surged upward like the exhale of something buried. Beneath was a narrow ladder descending into concrete darkness. Atlas stiffened, fur bristling from neck to tail, his teeth bared, not in aggression, but in warning. A scent lingered below, a scent he recognized. "He was here," Rachel whispered. John descended first, boots clanging softly on frost-covered rungs. The tunnel swallowed the daylight. Rachel followed, jaw clenched through the pain. Atlas came last, deliberate, gaze locked ahead. Inside, the tunnel branched into a narrow corridor reinforced with old concrete slabs cracked by time. Wires clung to the ceiling, powering faint flickering lights that cast a sickly yellow glow. Snowmelt dripped from cracks, freezing into jagged icicles. "This shouldn't exist," Rachel breathed. Ridgeway Ski Lodge never reported underground structures. "Which means he built parts of it himself," John murmured, "or repurposed something forgotten." Atlas's nose twitched. He trotted into a chamber framed by bent metal beams. Inside was a makeshift command center, a rickety table with an old generator, battery packs, and several monitors wired to improvised antennas. Rachel inhaled sharply. "These are feeds from the mountain trails. He's been watching everything. Watching me." John examined a map taped to the wall. Red marker traced winding paths across the ridges. Several were circled. One, near the town boundary, was marked with a bold X. "Did you ever investigate here?" John asked. Rachel shook her head. "Never this deep. I didn't know this existed." John felt his stomach twist. This was surveillance, preparation, obsession. Atlas suddenly snapped his head toward the corridor. His posture shifted into something primal, ears pinned forward, pupils narrowing. "What is it?" Rachel whispered. Atlas growled, stepping backward, placing himself between them and the entrance. John extinguished his flashlight. Silence stretched. Only dripping water and the hum of the generator filled the air, until a faint scrape whispered through the tunnel. Metal brushing metal. Then a slow exhale, too controlled to be wind. Someone was in the tunnel, someone moving with calm familiarity. Rachel gripped John's sleeve. He came back. John's mind raced. They weren't equipped for close-quarters combat. Atlas, though fierce, wasn't armored. Still, the dog held his ground, trembling with readiness. The scrape sounded again, closer. John guided Rachel toward the ladder, whispering, "We move now, quietly." Atlas backed toward them, never looking away from the darkness. Then, a soft vibration trembled through the metal floor. Footsteps above. Someone was closing the hatch. A dull thud, metal grinding into place. Rachel covered her mouth to muffle a gasp. John felt dread settle like ice in his chest. They were no longer alone, nor able to leave. Then, from the deeper shadows, a low chuckle drifted across the concrete. Quiet, confident. The sound of someone who had expected them. Atlas snarled, tail straight as a spear. John's pulse hammered. The man who stalked Rachel had returned, and he had just sealed them inside his hunting ground. The storm returned with a fury as John Mercer, Rachel Ford, and Atlas stood trapped beneath the mountain, the metal hatch sealed above them. The cold hummed through the concrete walls, vibrating like a slow, steady warning. Atlas's growl reverberated through the chamber, deep and primal, his amber eyes fixed on the dark tunnel beyond. John felt the thudding tension in the air the same way he once did just moments before breaching a hostile doorway. Sharp, electric, unforgiving. Even after retiring from SWAT, he still recognized the sensation of a predator drawing nearer. A faint echo drifted toward them, bootsteps on steel, not rushed, not hesitant. The calm approach of someone who believed he owned the space. John motioned Rachel behind a support beam. Her face was pale beneath the hood of her jacket, but her jaw tightened with a survivor's stubborn grit. Though trembling from cold and fear, she remained silent and alert. She stood with the posture of someone who had spent years navigating emergency scenes, staying functional under pressure despite shaking limbs. Her bruised cheek had darkened, and her hazel eyes glowed with exhaustion and worry. Atlas pressed forward a few steps, tail stiff, nose twitching. John crouched beside him, whispering into the growl vibrating in the dog's throat. "Easy, boy. Not yet." The footsteps halted just beyond the weak glow of the corridor lights. Then came a scrape, a slow pull of metal against stone. The intruder was dragging something. A shadow spilled into the tunnel's mouth, tall and wide-shouldered, filling the narrow space like a physical force. The man stepped forward one pace, then another, coming into the flickering bulb's glow. He wore a weather-beaten ski mask with rough slits for eyes and mouth, the knit fabric frayed. His build was thick with hard muscle, earned through labor rather than gyms. A heavy dark green canvas coat lined with fur clung to him, torn but durable, dusted with snow. His pants were worn insulated cargo pants, boots caked in frozen mud. He carried a scratched bolt-action rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who lived with weapons. When he spoke, his voice held a gravelly roughness born from years of isolation. "You had no business coming down here." Rachel gasped softly. She knew that voice. John straightened, stepping in front of her. "Harker." The man chuckled, a humorless vibration that echoed off the concrete. He pulled the mask away. Beneath it was an angular face carved by cold, with a salt-and-pepper beard growing unevenly across a hardened jaw. His hair hung in tangled waves, streaked with silver and black. His icy blue eyes held no warmth, only a fractured wilderness. Bob Harker, former owner of Ridgeway Ski Lodge, a man once ambitious, later ruined by tragedy, bankruptcy, and grief. After losing everything, he disappeared into the mountain, becoming a whispered warning, a solitary predator who punished trespassers. "It's been a long time since I've had visitors," Bob murmured, leveling the rifle. "But she," he pointed the muzzle at Rachel. Keeps coming where she doesn't belong. Rachel stepped forward despite John's warning hand. Her fear showed, but resolve straightened her spine. People were disappearing on your mountain. I came to help. I didn't know you were down here. Bob's eyes widened in momentary surprise before rage devoured it. It's my mountain, my land. They turned it into a ruin. They took everything, so now I take back what's mine. John raised his hand slowly. Nobody wants trouble. Let's talk. Bob laughed sharply. Talk? I know how men like you operate, Mercer. SWAT. He spat the word. You think you're saviors. John stiffened. How do you know my name? Bob tapped his head. Your cabin's been on my map for years. I know every man who settles in my territory. Atlas growled deeper. Bob's eyes flicked to the dog, calculation glinting. You should have stayed inside, he muttered. But since you didn't, he lifted the rifle. Atlas launched first. The dog burst forward in a blur of black and tan. Bob fired. The gunshot cracked like thunder, ricocheting through the tunnel. Atlas slammed into Bob before he could chamber another round. The rifle clattered away. Atlas back, John shouted, grabbing the harness. Bob shoved Atlas aside with shocking strength and lunged for the rifle. John kicked it farther down the tunnel. Bob roared and threw a punch. John dodged and drove his shoulder into Bob's torso. Bob was powerful, raw, unrefined, but fueled by obsession. He grappled with John, forearms like iron, breath hot with fury. Atlas snapped at Bob's sleeve, tearing fabric. Bob spun and slammed John into a support beam hard enough to shake his vision. Rachel snatched a broken wooden plank and struck Bob's back. The blow staggered him. Bob whirled, face contorted with rage. Get out, John barked. Both of you, ladder now! But Atlas refused to retreat. With a guttural snarl, he leapt again, clamping onto Bob's shoulder and yanking him off balance. Bob stumbled. John seized the moment. He twisted Bob's arm behind his back, an old SWAT maneuver, muscle memory taking over. Bob struggled, boots scraping the floor, breathing ragged. A howling gust rattled the hatch above them. Atlas kept Bob pinned as John tightened his hold. With one final heave, John slammed Bob to the ground, locking his arm. The mountain trembled as if exhaling. Bob Harker's resistance finally broke. Atlas stepped back, chest heaving. Rachel exhaled shakily, tears blurring her eyes. He's really, done. John nodded, breathless. He's not getting up again. Outside, snow roared through the trees, as though the mountain itself had been holding its breath. They had survived, for now. Dawn crept over the mountains with a muted gentleness. The storm finally spent, leaving the world rinsed clean beneath a thin veil of melting frost. Snow softened under the newborn light, turning the once savage slopes into a quiet, shimmering landscape. The blizzard had passed, and in its wake lay a stillness that felt almost sacred. A convoy of emergency vehicles wound their way up the service road toward the abandoned ski ridge, red and blue lights strobing against the pale sky. John Mercer stood outside the tunnel entrance with Atlas pressed loyally against his leg. The German shepherd's thick black and tan coat ruffled in the cold breeze, but his posture remained tall, proud, and utterly vigilant. His amber eyes tracked every movement, rescuers hauling equipment, deputies securing the perimeter, medics rushing toward the injured. Atlas's breath puffed in warm clouds, but there was no tension in his posture now, only readiness and the calm dignity of a dog who had fulfilled his purpose. Bob Harker, bound in reinforced restraints, was escorted into a sheriff's SUV by 2 deputies. Even now, the older man strained against the hold, though exhaustion dulled his movements. His angular, grizzled face, framed by tangled hair matted with melting snow, twisted into a grimace of defiance. In the morning light, the deep lines in his weathered skin and the hollow blaze in his icy blue eyes revealed a man consumed by rage and years of isolation. But the hunt was over. The mountain was no longer his kingdom. Deputy Clarence Boone, tall and broad-shouldered with warm walnut skin and short-cropped hair peppered with early gray, approached John with a nod of respect. "Mercer," he said, adjusting his hold on Harker, "Sheriff says we owe you one hell of a thank you. And that dog of yours, I've never seen anything like him." John gave a tired smile. "Atlas shows up when it matters." Atlas wagged his tail once, modestly, almost shyly. "Rachel's being taken to the hospital," Boone added, glancing toward the waiting ambulance. "She's stable, hypothermic and shaken, but she'll pull through." Relief washed through John, warm and heavy. She's stronger than she looks." Boone's lips twitched. "She said the same about you." A medic waved John toward the ambulance. Boone nodded toward the SUV holding Harker. "We'll take it from here." John climbed into the ambulance. Rachel lay wrapped in thermal blankets, an oxygen mask resting near her chin. Up close, her complexion had gained some color. Her chestnut hair was brushed back to reveal sharp cheekbones and the stubborn resilience alive in her hazel eyes. "John," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Atlas waited at the bumper until John nodded, then hopped inside, settling neatly at his boots. The shepherd's ears perked as he watched her. John took the seat beside her. "You're safe now," Rachel exhaled shakily. "Because you didn't. Leave me down there." John shook his head. "You weren't alone. You had both of us." Her eyes glistened. "You could have turned back when the storm hit. You could have climbed out when the hatch locked. You could have walked away. Why didn't you?" Sunlight streamed through a small window, warming Atlas's fur into a golden glow. The dog lifted his head, eyes half-lidded with calm trust. John took a slow breath. "Because when someone, or some dog, shows you there's still hope, you don't walk away from it. Not ever." Rachel studied him, then gave a soft, earnest smile. "I'm glad you didn't." The ambulance hummed along the wet road, tires hissing over melting ice. Atlas didn't sleep. He rested with his eyes half open, a guardian even in stillness. At the hospital, nurses guided Rachel into a warm isolation room. Heated lights bathed everything in amber calm. John sat by the bed as doctors examined her. Eventually, Dr. Karen Whitmore entered, a composed woman in her late 50s with silver hair in a tight bun and intelligent eyes behind rectangular glasses. Her white coat hung neatly over a burgundy sweater. "Ms. Ford will be fine," she said. "Mild hypothermia, dehydration, bruised ribs, but nothing life-threatening. A few days of rest will do the job." John's shoulders finally lowered. "Thank you." Dr. Whitmore nodded at Atlas. "Thank him too. From the bruising patterns, she wouldn't have lasted much longer without help." Rachel opened her eyes once more. "John?" "I'm here," he answered, leaning forward. Outside the window, storm clouds pulled apart, sunlight spilling across the hospital parking lot. Ice melted into glittering rivulets. Atlas rose, padded closer, and gently rested his head against John's leg, eyes warm with unspoken loyalty. In that beam of light, his fur shone like burnished gold, a quiet hero unaware of his own legend. Rachel watched him, her breathing steady. "John, if you hadn't come down that ladder, I don't think—" John raised his hand gently. "You don't owe me anything. You're alive. That's what matters." She smiled faintly. "Still, thank you for not turning back." John rested a hand on Atlas's thick coat. The shepherd leaned into him, offering silent reassurance. Outside, the world thawed, snow retreating to reveal damp earth, scattered pine needles and shy hints of green. A world waking up again, just like them. And Atlas, with that quiet nudge of his head, seemed to say, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." When the storm faded and the mountains breathed again, one truth remained. Hope survives when even one heart refuses to give up. The man with the storm-blue eyes found it in the snow. The loyal shepherd carried it on 4 determined legs, and the woman who fought to stay alive held onto it even in the darkest cold. Life brings storms to all of us. Some we see coming, others hit without warning. But courage often looks simple, taking one more step, reaching one more hand, believing one more time. Heroes aren't always loud. They're the ones who stay when everything else tells them to walk away. If this story moved you, even for a moment, please share your thoughts below. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Dogs of Valor so we can keep bringing you stories where loyalty wins, hope survives, and courage walks right beside us, sometimes on 4 paws.